Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 10. Labour and the Conservatives have both been setting out their plans for the economy today. Labour is promising a huge boost in spending and what it's calling an irreversible shift of power and wealth away from London. The Tories are also vowing to spend billions. It's now clear that whoever wins the election will spend and borrow far more than we've seen for a long time. Labour says it will invest an extra £55 billion a year on infrastructure like housing and schools, as well as environmental projects. That's roughly double what the Conservatives are offering, an extra £20 to £25 billion a year. Our Economics Editor Faisal Islam looks at the competing pledges and what they could mean for the country.
The northwest of England, the cradle of the Industrial Revolution, and today on either end of the East Lancs Road, the Chancellor Sajid Javid in Manchester and the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell in Liverpool, launching a fiscal revolution, a fundamental change to policy on borrowing and investment, and not sounding too different.
It means investment on a scale never seen before in this country.
It means billions of pounds more to spend on the infrastructure revolution that this country needs.
Just down the road from here, my granddad and my
John
dad...
McDonnell in his hometown announcing that a Labour government will not try to bring the national debt down as a rule and instead will increase borrowing to fund hundreds of billions in investments to solve what he calls the social and climate change emergencies.
Isn't it interesting? After all the years I've been arguing, since I've been Shadow Chancellor, that's 4 years, I've been arguing that we need to invest. And the Tories have attacked me, abused me, as though I'm some revolutionary. Now they're falling into line, but on a scale that doesn't meet the challenges we face.
Because they want to keep the debt down?
Well, because they're not willing to recognise that governments have to borrow to invest.
Labour wants to make investments in infrastructure such as the Mersey tidal energy scheme not far from here, and they argue that the value of the asset should be taken into account, not just the debt required to fund it. That's called a net worth target and has not been tried in a major economy before. Such is the deluge of spending here that there are doubts that it could even be actually spent. Labour's message is a little like saying on a national scale that a homeowner shouldn't worry about the value of a mortgage in isolation. The value of a house and investing in it matters as well, and that frees up hundreds of billions of borrowing to spend on investment. The Conservatives criticise the extent, but the basic idea of changing the rules to take advantage of currently low borrowing rates for governments, that is rather similar. In his case, tens of billions more in borrowing in order to allow an increase in annual investment by a half, unlike Labour, who want to double it. Mr Javid does promise the total of the UK's historic borrowing would be kept in check, but scrapped the formal rule demanding it falls.
Excessive debt would risk everything the British people have worked so hard to achieve over the past decade of recovery. The question at this election is, who do you trust to protect that?
These plans are independent of what happens with Brexit, but over at the Bank of England, a weak economic outlook starting to point towards an interest rate cut.
Brexit uncertainties are dominating, weighing particularly hard on business investment, which unusually during an expansion has contracted in 5 of the past 6 quarters and is currently estimated to be just 0.5% higher than at the time of the referendum.
Other opposition parties such as the Lib Dems and the SNP said that cancelling Brexit would be the best way to boost the economy. Whoever wins next month, we appear to be on a journey to more investment and more borrowing too. Quite the change from the previous 3 elections. Faisal Islam, BBC News.
The former Labour MP and Minister Ian Austin has said that Jeremy Corbyn is completely unfit to be Prime Minister and has urged people to vote for Boris Johnson instead. It comes after Labour's Deputy Leader Tom Watson announced he was stepping down as an MP, but for personal reasons. Here's our political editor, Kuenssberg.
The buses look the same, but it's not just the season that makes this a very weird election, as one senior MP put it. Inside both the big parties, there are serious doubts about the leaders. Jeremy Corbyn's track record of handling or not handling fast enough racism against Jews is under attack again.
Anti-Semitism is a poison and an evil in our society. I have spent my whole life fighting against racism. I will die an anti-racist.
But two of his former MPs simply don't believe that.
Not fit to hold high office.
There's no love lost between these two and the Labour leadership, but for years they were both deeply loyal lieutenants of the party. Listen to them now, urging you to choose not a Labour Prime Minister, but a Conservative.
If you're not going to do what's right on a fundamental question like racism, what are you going to do it on? I wouldn't say Boris Johnson is unfit to be our Prime Minister in the way that I say that about, about Jeremy Corbyn. I think the country's got a big choice to make, and I think Jeremy Corbyn's completely unfit to lead it.
And another who worried about anti-Semitism is off too. Tom Watson, the deputy leader, survived an attempt to oust him a couple of months ago. But he's standing down, he says, for personal reasons. Not all of Mr Corbyn's supporters in Liverpool are sorry to say goodbye.
I think good riddance.
Why'd you say that?
Because this election comes down to a brutal choice, and that needs a socialist government. And if you're not a socialist, then, shut the door on the way out.
I do think that the party now is united more than ever, and I think that we just need to, as Labour supporters, mobilise.
Every party has its massive divisions. As he heads off around the country, Jeremy Corbyn, of course, wants to look ahead to the next few weeks. But the Labour leader cannot completely escape the ghosts of his past problems.
These early days haven't been an easy ride for Boris Johnson either. Concerns about candidates, resignations and departures.
I vowed not to drink.
And in Scotland, where the Prime Minister broke his campaign booze ban, the party might struggle to keep their 13 seats.
We're the party that's saying, let's, come on, get together as a whole UK, let's get Brexit done, get this thing over the line, and then get on with bringing our great country together and unleashing the potential of the whole UK.
The Tories' rivals in Scotland, though, are only too happy to have him on the trail.
I'm so confident that Boris Johnson will not go down very well with Scottish voters in this election, that my words to him as he leaves Scotland this afternoon may be, haste you back.
But convincing victories come to parties that can reach beyond their own tribe. This time, no politician can see clearly round the corner. Laura Kuenssberg, BBC News, Darwin.
Well, let's talk to our Economics Editor Faisal Islam now. And the scale of the spending and borrowing pledges from both parties today gives a sense of the enormity of it all.
These are hugely consequential announcements. Both major parties, if not quite on the same page, reading from the same book of changing their budget rules to borrow more money to fund investment. And Labour have pushed this further, hundreds of billions. They say because the country can't afford not to make these investments because of what they say is a climate change emergency and an emergency in terms of our social fabric, care homes and housing and the like. The Conservatives, though, in pumping out half that money, still a huge amount. Sajid Javid suggesting that, yes, we can give you the spending that you want, but still keep public finances in check. So this suggests a very different sort of parameters to this general election to the three that we've had before. Less about how do you fund every spending rise, more about who do you trust to spend the most wisely.
Our Economics Editor Faisal Islam, thank you. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens and Plaid Cymru, three parties who all want to stay in the EU, have agreed not to stand against each other next month in dozens of seats across England and Wales to try to give the strongest candidate the best chance of winning. Alex Forsyth reports from Winchester, which is currently held by the Conservatives, and where the Greens have now stepped aside in favour of the Lib Dems.
The country is poised to make a crucial choice, but in some seats it will be a limited one. Winchester is one place some anti-Brexit parties have agreed not to stand against each other.
I think it's a really good idea. I think that's the only way we've got a chance of staying in the EU.
I think anyone trying to hijack for or against Brexit is wrong.
In this current Tory seat, it means the Green Party won't put up a candidate, but the Lib Dems will. The idea, to avoid splitting the pro-EU vote. The Lib Dem leader, whose party could benefit most, argues Brexit is key in this election.
It speaks volumes about how high the stakes are, how important this is that these parties, ourselves, the Liberal Democrats, with the Green Party and Plaid Cymru, have been able to put aside those narrow party interests to work together in the national interest.
There are 60 constituencies where agreement's been reached between the Lib Dems, Plaid Cymru and the Green Party. 11 in Wales, the rest in England, targeting Remain areas like here in Winchester. But without Labour involved, the effect could be limited.
It's hard to know how much difference this might make. It could only have an impact in perhaps a small handful of seats. But this, more than most, is an unpredictable election. And even a handful of seats could be crucial.
In this eco-hub in the city centre, local businesswomen Harriet and Laura have their reservations.
There's a lot of logic behind their kind of unifying together. But Brexit will be over, however it is over, and then we need to move on as a country. And without all the voices being heard, we're doing ourselves a disservice.
Both wanted to remain in the EU, but have concerns about efforts to stop Brexit.
The country voted to leave, so I do wonder if we should be following what that decision was. I would prefer that they all put themselves up, they said what they wanted to do, and then we were given the opportunity to vote for those parties.
Whether this limits choice or focuses minds, the Brexit lines are now clearly drawn. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Winchester.